Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Policy Scrutiny Committee meeting. Just before we start, as normal, I have my chairman's introduction to give, so I will read this out. I note there's no one in the public gallery, so I won't read that section. But the main section as follows. This is a meeting of the Council held in public. It is not a public meeting. There is no fire drill planned. So if the fire alarm sounds, please leave by the exit nearest the large screen at the front of the room and proceed down the fire exit to the courtyard. Once it is safe to return, councillors will receive a text message. Officers will also advise when it is safe to return to the meeting. We are recording the meeting this evening using our webcasting system. The webcast will be transmitted live and will also be available on the council's website following the meeting. And finally, last but by no means least, all mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so that the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. Thank you. Okay, so item number 1, apologies for absence. I believe we don't have any apologies for items. Okay, absence, sorry, no apologies for absence. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Members, any declarations of interest? No? Okay. I will provide the same one as I provided at the last meeting, which is, I believe, a non-registrable interest. We will no doubt be talking about Ford Dunton at this meeting. I did work there for many years for Ford. I'm a Ford pensioner and my daughter works there. So that's my interest. Okay. Item number 3 then is sorry, I'm on the right one here. The minutes. Okay. I think I'm right in saying that Councillor Myers was the only other member apart from myself who was at the previous meeting. So Councillor Myers, the minutes. So we can take a vote, yes. So for, yeah. Against? Abstentions.
Are you for, against, or abstaining?
Abstain.
Abstain.
Okay. Okay. So, moving on to the main agenda items then. So the first subject we have, item 4, is the principles of economic development. So I'm just going to pass over now to Councillor Yacoub to introduce that item, and then I believe we'll go to the officers. So Councillor Yacoub, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. You have before you, as set out in your reports, principles of our forthcoming economic development strategy for Basildon. This new approach is designed to support the growth of our local economy by focusing on inclusive growth, an approach that not only fosters increased prosperity, but also ensures equity, creating opportunities for all and distributing the benefits of growth fairly. Our strategy will be guided by 8 core principles that emphasise civic pride through place-based regeneration, sustainable growth through human infrastructure development, and the importance of skills training and productivity enhancement. We will also prioritise the support of the tech and green economy, promote economic diversification, and foster cultural development and community wealth building. As we align public and private sector stakeholders around this common vision for economic growth and sustainability, we will be better equipped to reposition our growth strategy in light of our new corporate priorities with the emerging local plan and the South Essex Council's action plan. This strategic framework will enable us to fully capture Basildon's economic growth potential. Ultimately, our goal is to create a robust, future-proof economic development strategy that champions sustainable, inclusive and diversified growth for our borough. So we look forward to hearing any insights or feedback that you have as we embark on this important journey.
Thank you, Councillor Yacoub, for that introduction. So over to the officers now, I think. Can I pass it to you, Patrick and Christine?
The last economic development strategy was published in 2020. In the midst of COVID recovery, obviously there's time now to refresh this important bit of work. At the moment, there's ongoing South Essex Council's work in terms of creating a new strategy, and clearly the council is working on its local plan delivery, so it's the perfect time to execute a new economic development strategy in line with the new corporate priorities. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. So yeah, I think now we'll move over to the members. Guys, any questions, observations, comments that you'd like to make on item 4 over to the floor? Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, please, because there's nothing in here about this. Obviously, Patrick, you'll be aware that 2 bids are currently at ballot stage for Billericay and Wickford. As part of those, there is, as part of the business plans for those, there is encouragement of business uptake for vacant units and things like that, which obviously falls under economic development. But there is nothing in this report about the 8 things that we're doing that actually mentions the local towns that will have a bid in place. Because I do believe the ballot is going fairly well at the moment. So just wanted some insight into whether that has been considered or will be considered going forward if they are successful, because the ballots will be done in November, I believe.
Thank you. I do believe there is some reference to the business improvement district work happening in the community wealth building section. I will cross-check that. We will happily take further comments into the next stage of development. The ongoing town centre development work has been a key priority area and one that we're keen to foster.
Are you happy with that answer to your question, Councillor Myers? Yeah, sure. Okay, Councillor Moore, Councillor Brown, any observations from you guys? Councillor Moore.
Yeah, just really a little bit of clarification on page 15. We talk about 4 Basildon wards are being categorised as left behind neighbourhoods. Which 4 are those?
It's our understanding that all 4 are in the south of the borough. However, I can't name all 4 at the moment, but we will get back to you on those, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. You also talk about 4 Basildon wards being categorised as left behind neighbourhoods, of which there are only 225 in England. So 225 out of how many? So what is the percentage, if you like, of the from the total? I don't know whether 4 is good, bad, terrible. It's not clear.
We will provide clarifications in the next stage.
Okay, thank you. At the end of that, on page 15, we talk about the workforce, 25%. 25% of Basildon's workforce are classed as low skilled. and 32% are medium skilled. So does that mean 43% are high skilled?
Yes, that is correct, Councillor.
Okay, and we also say 21% outline a large proportion of the Basildon Borough population have no qualifications, 21%. Compared to what? Does that mean 79% have high qualifications in the borough?
This statistic refers to post-16 education.
So what it's saying, Councillor Moore, is the fact that of our whole population, we've got 21% of our over 16s have no qualifications. That's nothing above level. They don't get to nothing above level 2, and obviously that's over the whole borough. And obviously we've got a higher proportion that sits in Pitsea. So then you get into level 3 and level 4 and above, and those are the qualifications that count. So basically, this is all post 16. So 21% of our post 16 people have no qualifications at post 16, and then we look at then how that challenge and obviously that increases then 23 in Basildon as a whole, and obviously 28% in Pitsea.
Sorry, Councillor, just before you come back, and you're welcome to do it in a second, can I just double check that, officers, because the data I have here says that the next category above no qualifications is level 1, which is a GCSE grade but not pass. So no qualifications means no qualifications at all, I think. So just to... Yeah, so just to clarify that, shall I clarify that as I've got the data in front of me? So no qualifications in Basildon, 21%. Level 1 and entry level, so a GCSE grade but not a pass, i.e. not a grade 4 or above, 13%. So altogether 34% of our adults don't have a recognised GCSE pass. And then another 17% have a level 2 as their highest qualification, which is a GCSE grade 4 or above, which is categorised in secondary education, as I understand it, as a pass.
So wouldn't it be better to actually spell that out instead of you just reading it out to us, because the report doesn't tell us that?
Yeah,
I mean, you're quite right, Councillor Moore. There should have been we should have actually had the 21 data as an addendum to the document in terms of that data. But I mean, in reflection though, the statistics were the position we were trying to get over in this is actually why we're heading in this direction. So this is looking at local economic and skills context. I think that the data is there to highlight the problems in terms of low qualifications and how that sits across the borough. I don't think it was to be taken in a more factual way than that. And this is actually just a report that starts the process, that then sets out how we've got to the 8 key principles of this new document. That the new document itself will then set out in more detail where all that evidence comes from. It would have to be evidence-based and evidence-led. I think the report was written by the Durham team, just highlighting some highlights from what we will be looking at, rather going into any depth and any detail.
anything further from you, Councillor Moore?
Yeah, on page 17, we talk about developing human infrastructure. What the hell is human infrastructure?
So this is so developing human infrastructure through inward investment is looking at I suppose that we're looking at actually skills, and it says the council will prioritise human infrastructure projects that will improve skills training and develop increased connectivity and business productivity, as well as support sustainable transport with which reduce environmental impact. So basically, human infrastructure is about skills training, and it's how we work with our partners to create, and obviously looking at working with existing partners to create that, and then looking at the wider infrastructure around those projects to create inward investment that would allow us then to look at some key goals around sustainability and both social and environmental priorities. So I mean, I suppose it's about, it should be called sustainable growth, growing skills, I suppose you could call it in English terms, Councillor Moore.
Yeah, I think you're right, because well, infrastructure to me is buildings and that sort of thing, not whether you've got O levels or a skill.
So I suppose we could change. So I suppose in terms of that core principle, we could change it to sustainable growth, developing skills through inward investment, and I suppose it should be in inward investment and partnership work. I suppose it is actually those two go together quite well, don't they? So we change that to partnerships.
Christine, would you mind saying that again slightly more slowly so the
Sorry.
minutes can
So basically,
capture
the
it?
sustainable. There's 8 core principles, of which the report goes through all 8, and there's one we've got at the moment that says sustainable growth, developing human infrastructure through inward investment. And I think the point Councillor Moore's making is human infrastructure actually relates to skills training. So what we perhaps need to say is whether we change that core principle to developing skills through partnership and inward investment. So that core principle we just amend slightly.
Can I just come in on that? Actually, I had exactly the same question as Councillor Moore on that, but I did also note that there are some other items under this heading that don't relate to skills or whatever. It mentions broadband as well. So yeah, I think we need an appropriate title for that section, or more than one section.
So skills are picked up in the next section, skills development training and improving productivity. Perhaps if we take that one away and we come and we look at that and we give the scrutiny a bit more of information on what that looks like, because I think what we've got is that we've created 8 core principles, and I think we've tried to fit things into them, and I think that I'll have a look at that one, because I think skills is picked up in the next one. So actually there is a bit of a duplication, which is fine, between the 2 core principles, but I think that perhaps we just need to look at it further, because this one does overlap with yeah. Let me have a look at it. So.
Councillor Brown.
May I throw a term in that might be helpful, and you're going to come back, but developing human capabilities through inward investment, because then that would cover both education and would explain why you'd done broadband as an important thing, because it increases both of those things increase people's capabilities.
I quite like that, Councillor Brown. I mean, leave it with me, and what I'll do is I can put some options back, and what we can do is, like we did with the local planners, we can send them back to scrutiny in advance of anything else, in advance of the minutes, to the scrutiny committee, and we can then get you to comment on which one you prefer, and then we can go with it, then we can put that into the minutes. Is that okay?
Are you okay with that,
Chair,
Councillor Moore?
and then obviously the Chair can pass it around. Is that okay? That's great, thanks.
Okay, anything further from you, Councillor Moore? No. Councillor Brown, anything from you? No. Okay, so I've got some points myself that I'd like to just raise, if I may. The first one is that there's an element of this that I think needs to be in our plan in order to deliver on our vision for economic development, and I'm not sure whether it is or not, so I'll take your guidance on that. I mean, I think, to me, the essence of this plan is about inclusive growth, isn't it? It's about growth in Basildon for Basildon, and quite right too. But I'll actually give some of this in your background, Patrick. To me, we've got some fairly significant challenges to overcome in order to deliver on that strategy, one of which we've already mentioned is the skills position in the borough. and you talk, I think, about that in more detail in terms of a two-tier situation that we have, where we have a big number of people who are in lower paid, living in Basildon, working in Basildon, in lower paid, lower skilled jobs, and we have another tier who are living in the borough but working outside the borough and in higher paid, higher skilled jobs. I mean, I would argue there's a third tier, again, based on my experience at Ford Dunton, for example, which is people who are living outside of the borough, who are working in the borough in higher skills, more highly skilled, higher paid jobs. But I think there's another group that I think, this is coming to the nub of the point I'm trying to make, which is a kind of a tier 4, which is a group of people who are living in the borough, working in the borough, in higher paid, higher skilled jobs. And I think it's absolutely critical that we attract and retain those people in the borough, because to me they are key to us attracting and retaining the businesses in the borough that are ultimately going to deliver our vision of inclusive growth that benefits everybody. I mean, to put it in context, as to why I think it's so critical, if you imagine that you are a lower league football team, and you've got a nice big catchment area, you've got a big fan base, but you're in the lower leagues, and you have aspirations to get to the Premier League, it would be lovely if you could do that by harnessing your existing squad of potentially locally developed players. But the reality of the situation is probably that you're going to have to buy in some players from outside in order to work with the players you've already got in your squad from the locality to deliver on that position. So I think that is a critical element of the strategy. As I said, I'm not sure if it's really in there or not, but I couldn't really discern it from the document there. And I think in terms of the kind of thing that we might put in the document, this is perhaps a little bit too granular, but housing springs to mind, because I've noticed actually since I joined the council that there are those where, when a proposal is put forward that would increase our stock of affordable, high quality housing, object to it almost by reflex. And I think what they're potentially missing is that if we want to retain or attract and retain people with higher skills and with in higher skilled employment, then one of the things that we have to do is have an increased supply of quality, affordable housing. So that's an element that could be included, for example, within the document. And obviously, I've spoken for quite a long period there, but I do think it's a critical element that we need in the plan, that we will at some point need to attract some people into the borough with higher skills in higher paid jobs to make their lives here.
So, Councillor Baker, you made the exact same point about the local plan itself. So the strategy. So in terms of how the strategy will hang off the local plan. So there's a policy in the strategy. There's a policy in the local plan that this strategy will hang off. The strategy will be adopted as a development strategy by the council. And because it will be mentioned in the local plan, it will have some weight in the local plan process. So I think what we would not have in the strategy is because obviously we wouldn't try and duplicate the intentions of that strategy based on the local plan, but there needs to be some connectivity in the opening context of a new strategy that sets out that key driver between quality housing, new quality housing, the emphasis of high infrastructure in terms of new infrastructure that allows, and then how that connects to jobs. Because obviously what we have to remember is that the local plan seeks to deliver 28,000 new homes, and that automatically then requires 28,000 new jobs. So there is a connection. So this needs to reflect that connection. But I think rather than repeating ourselves, I think the best thing is we mention it in the beginning, and then this then hangs off the local plan in terms of the ambitions, in terms of housing and jobs going forward. But again, it's that production of high quality housing.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I mean, I totally agree with that. No issue. As I think the key point that I'm making really is that if we want to get to inclusive growth, we have to attract some people to live and work in the borough, into higher paid, higher skilled jobs, as well as developing our existing population. So just there's a few more points actually from me, if I may. Some of these are a little bit more detailed in terms of the content. So when we talk about sector development within the document, sorry, I don't have a page reference here, but where we talk about a number of sectors that we wish to retain, the first one's advanced manufacturing, I think. A couple of points on that. Firstly, we don't have engineering or research and development as one of those. And obviously I'm broken record now, but Ford Dunton, it's not an advanced manufacturing site, it's a research and development facility. And this is open to interpretation, but generally speaking, jobs are higher value and more skilled in a research and development facility than they are in an advanced manufacturing facility. So that is critically important. I also noticed that we've got health and social care in that section, and obviously that is a critical area for the borough. My question really is whether it's an appropriate umbrella heading to include health and social care, or whether that ought to have its own section, because it doesn't fit particularly seamlessly with the other categories in that bit, for example, advanced manufacturing.
I mean, I mean, what the overall title is, promoting economic diversity and sector development. That's the title. And the title, I mean, I completely get your point on advanced manufacturing, because obviously the R&D emphasis on Fords is key. So I think it needs to. I think we need a separate one about R&D, because obviously there's quite a few other R&D institutions within the borough. I mean, so therefore, if you look at promoting economic diversity and sector development, health and social care would fit then within that, because that's basically what we're trying to say. Is we're saying that we've already got some sectors, and there's some key sectors that we can continue to improve and diversify on, and the sector development is around those key areas: advanced manufacturing, R&D, business services, tech and creative services, industry, and then health and social care. That is a clear employment growth area we'd be looking for, because obviously having the hospital, obviously the CDC is going to come on board soon. We've got the NHS looking at diversifying within the borough as well. So I actually think that they should be key headings that we then do some further work on. But I get your point that R&D should be a key part of that.
Thank you. I mean, my point on health and social care was probably that if you're looking at growth, and headroom, if you like, there's potentially less within that. CDC accepted, obviously, than there is within, say, tech or advanced manufacturing. But yeah, I accept your point. Thank you. Next point from me is we obviously we talk about upskilling people through SEAT, which I think is terrific. However, I think I'd like to see us have something in the plan, if we don't have it, for employers who choose to go an apprentice route or a graduate recruitment route, because for those routes, I think I'm right in saying that SEATs wouldn't necessarily apply, but they are potentially critical areas for developing the borough.
I mean, that clearly comes under the skills development training and improving productivity. We may need just to widen that to look at some issues around. I mean, there is the new, obviously, the way the apprenticeship levy is going to be working. We haven't quite got the new indications of that yet. So I think there is that whole bit about, and it is about retraining as well, because talk about Fords. Ford is training, its workforce have to train from, the combustion engine to electrification. So upskilling and reskilling of our workforce is key, and that goes back to that whole thing right at the beginning, isn't it? About 21% and 23% and now of our population that haven't got qualifications. Upskilling and reskilling is going to be one of the key priorities around how we deal with that changing workforce, and I think this does need to reflect that. So I think you're quite right. We need to, I think, within that sector around skills development training and improving productivity, we need a big piece in that back on upskilling and reskilling, I think.
Yeah, and graduate is particularly key, because obviously we don't have a university or whatever within the borough. So if an employer does decide that they're going to recruit from graduate only, that automatically puts people within Basildon at a disadvantage as we look at the stats at present in comparison with other regions, because of our skills situation. Next point from me is we talk in, I think we use both of these words in the report. We talk about inequity and we talk about inequality, and I just want to be sure that we are using the appropriate one in each instance here. So, I mean, my understanding is that inequity basically means unfairness. So, for imagine, you might have two people who are very similar in terms of their qualifications, skills, background, whatever, one of whom is being treated in a more preferential way to the other. So to me, that's what inequity means. Inequality is where you have what you might call large disparities within the same, for example, geographical area. So you've got, we cite some of this in the report, don't we, about life expectancy and so on. So not picking out anything specific in the report, but we definitely use inequity and inequality. Would you mind having a look at that and making sure that we are using it appropriately as we go through? I think some just touch on some of the points that Councillor Moore's already raised. So on the background section, we talk about South Essex. Can you just clarify exactly what is meant by South Essex?
That's SEC, or previously known as a seller. That's the South Essex Council. So that's Thurrock, ourselves, Castle Point, Southend, Rochford, Brentwood, and obviously the partner authority was obviously the county. So that's South Essex Councils. So we are a group of we're like a sub-region of the county. We have got synergy and similarities between all the authorities, and then you've got the flip to that is the North Essex authorities, which obviously is everybody else. So we have got together through. I mean, initially the South Essex councils were formed as a seller, and they were formed following the Secretary of State writing to Castle Point to tell them that they had to talk to their friends in other local planning authorities to do with housing numbers. That's where it all came from, and that's where a seller was created. And then since then, quite rightly, and I think quite rightly, it's actually gone down a different route, and South Essex Councils has gone more down a route of being responsible for economic development and looking more at strategic opportunity rather than defining itself as creating a new local plan, whatever that looks like. Because I think it's all about actually creating the opportunities that sub-regional sort of amount does. So the comments about South Essex Councils are those authorities.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry, my computer's just gone down. Okay, so on a broader point then, I think I don't have any issue at all with the conclusions of the background section. I think it's absolutely fine. But going back to what Councillor Moore was saying earlier on, I think some of the points made could benefit from some validation and clarity, yeah. And that might be a good point, because obviously you might look at South Essex and make an assumption as to what it actually is. So I'm interested it includes Brentwood, for example, which potentially could skew the data. And on things like, we quote GVA per person, so I think it would be useful to compare that with East of England, the whole of England, whatever we've got. So it's clear that the points we're making are valid. And on life expectancy, I would personally pick one area, and because I think we kind of pick different wards as our maximums and minimums. I think we need to standardise that. Okay, so I'm getting quite specific now. On page 15, could you just have a look at the wording on that and make sure it's clear whether we are referring to Basildon Borough or Basildon Town, because I'm not absolutely clear myself on that. And I know that's always an issue, because obviously the borough has the same name as the main town, but if you could just validate that.
But you need to be clear, I think we should be, when we do the report.
Where are we going again?
It's basically here. So Basildon Borough population have no qualifications, I think.
So the 21% refers to the Basildon Borough as a whole, and then underneath it is the breakdown of of percentages of specific areas within the borough. We fully take your point, and we'll ensure that this is more clearer in the next version. But that was to try and emphasise the different areas and the disparity where there's higher levels.
I think Councillor Moore, Councillor Baker, sorry. I think what it's saying is that Basildon Borough has got 21%, if you look at the whole borough. Then you looked at Basildon itself as the new town, and we're saying there's 23%. Then if you break that down by ward basis, Pitsea is dramatically different to the overall average. So actually it creates that sliding perspective. You look at Basildon as a whole borough, 21%. You look at Basildon as a town, it starts to go up. And if you pick that obviously we think it's one of those four wards, which is the Pitsea side, and then that goes right up to 28%. And that obviously goes back to the challenge that Councillor Moore made right at the beginning is what are the four worst performing areas. Obviously what we're saying is Pitsea is one of them.
Okay, thank you. So the references to Basildon in the paragraph above, where statistics aren't quoted apart from the deprivation one, is that all borough? So median workplace pay,
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Okay.
So Councillor Baker, taking this in terms of how we report this in terms of our overall strategy, we need to make it very clear, and both I think yourself and Councillor Moore have raised this, when we're talking about Basildon Borough, we're talking about Basildon, Wickford and Billericay, and when we're talking about wards, make it very clear where the statistics are coming from, what those statistics are showing. And I think also we need to perhaps very clearly put the resource, and if the resource needs to be clearly explaining, we'll actually put the resource in, especially for taking this forward to Cabinet.
Okay, one last point from me. On careers interventions in schools, I would prefer it here if we give the statement a focus on secondary education first. The way it reads at the moment is that the way to address it is at primary level with continuation at secondary level. And the reason I make the observation is drawing from recent experience of working in a school, even students in Key Stage 4 are in they don't know what they don't know position as regards careers. And obviously we had the skills show recently at Gloucester Park, which I think was a fantastic step in the right direction on that score. You could also argue potentially that the reason that students in Key Stage 4 still don't have a clear idea on careers is that we didn't start at primary level. But I still think the point is we overestimated our peril, how much focus school children have on careers, and secondary is the key point at which we should be raising that with them based upon my experience.
So, Councillor Baker, I would possibly disagree. So we do. There already is some work that we do in partnership with the county and to authorities in Essex, and that work is about introducing to primary school children options for future careers. It's not saying it's just giving them opportunities, and it's opening that up. And I suppose a lot of that is to improve diversity and improve opportunities for both sexes, and also how they can and also abilities. So I would so from our perspective, from a good economic development perspective in terms of future children, it's actually about you bring it in very early, so you give them the opportunity to look at what the opportunities are, and then you start heavily moving forward into secondary school. So I'd probably say that the balance needs to be right in terms of how much emphasis we put on it. But I do think there is a need to actually start at the primary school level, because obviously it is about how children in the future will look at their future careers. So I would possibly disagree on that point, but only marginally disagree.
Yeah, okay, I mean, I accept that, that's fine. It was more the emphasis that kind of secondary is the key thing. I'm not saying that we shouldn't take enlightened steps at primary level. I think that's a great idea.
Maybe we need to word like enlightened. That's quite good. That's quite a nice term.
Thank you. Councillor Myers, sorry to keep you waiting.
That's perfectly okay, Chair. Thank you very much. Just a few points. Obviously, we've got the heading for health and social care under promoting economic diversification section. Just obviously, I've sat on planning for a couple of years now, and I know the council has obviously worked constructively with the NHS when it comes to the CDC, providing facilities for them to come in at Pitsea. But of course, it's up to the health sector to decide what they need going forwards, rather than collaboration between us. Because obviously they said that they needed this. The funding came through from central government, and then we provided a site for them to go to. But obviously, retaining and increasing is entirely just down to the NHS to decide on growth levels and what they will need for the future. So I'm just clarifying that in terms of this strategy, because if the NHS come along and say they don't need any particular growth in their workforce or locations, GPs, etc., which we know is rubbish, but they may come along and say that they don't need it at the present time, but may do in 15, 20 years' time. It just seems. I'm just wondering what this council's view in this particular section, and how we can kind of foster that, because obviously with the skills training and everything else, we can have some clout. We can go out to schools, as just mentioned. We can go to businesses. We can hold sort of tech shows and employment shows, etc., which has been happening across the borough now for many, many years. But I'm just wondering, in terms of actually this point in the policy, how much influence we'll have, because they're the ones that decide. That's my first point, sorry.
So as indicated in the report, along with the local plan and the trajectory of increased housing over the next 25 years, there will be two halves. In terms of demographics of the borough, there will be more of an ageing population, and therefore, by its nature, there will be more chances for additional work and call for healthcare professionals to help service more of an ageing population. And this will also be combined with the sheer number of increase of dwellings in the borough and the people living. At the moment, we know, for example, that there's interest in private sector healthcare development as well happening. So again, there's provision for more advancement in the health and social care sector, and something that we can make more clearer. That subsectors such as medical tech manufacturing as well, which is also prevalent in the borough. There are other opportunities where that will feed into the process as well.
I think Councillor Myers also, currently, the 21 census confirms there is 14% of our workforce in this sector already, which is a large sector of, and I think what we're saying in this is the fact that we've already done some work on one of the employment areas about getting the NHS into some of the activities up there. Obviously, we've assisted. So I think what we're saying is that there's some key factors in terms of employment growth, and I think additional nursing and social care, and also actual carers as well is going to be key for the next growth. What we're saying is that our strategy needs to accept that. So how we can accept that, I think, is we're not responsible for it, but we have to be aware that it's going to be a growth area. And I think highlighting it as a growth area will allow, when that comes forward for planning, or when it comes forward for any partnership work with the NHS, we've already got it in our strategy as a growth. I think a lot of this we can't, as a local authority, actually create the new jobs. What we can create is that approach to how we facilitate the work together. So I think we need to have it in there, because obviously that's 14% of our population is huge. And we work very closely with the NHS on new nurses coming into the country. We do a lot of work with that already. So I think it's been aware that that's a growth area for us, and actually we need to be wary of that. Has to stay as a key part of our strategy for economic growth, because 14% is a large amount of our people that are employed in it.
Yeah. Any further points?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that answer, and obviously just wanted to get those sort of points across, because obviously we don't have control directly of what happens. In terms of skills, because obviously we know the health and social care sector also employs quite a lot of low-skilled people, porters, etc. So majority of those would probably make up the 14% of the workforce. I totally agree and say that helping to upskill create opportunities for people to get education. But you have to also realise some of the human factors in this, where some children at secondary level just don't want to learn, and obviously there is a factor in there sometimes with that, in terms of what happens in the future and not getting grades, either being truant or whatever reason. So there is always a factor on that point. But generally, yes, obviously upskilling people and getting them into decent paid jobs is well founded, and obviously will help with the diversification of businesses that we already have. We have Leonardo, we have Costa, we have Amazon, we have very large businesses in the borough already making home here. So I think it's very important to realise that low skilled jobs are also needed in the borough, rather than just the highly paid ones. Not saying that everyone should be looking for a low skilled job and everyone should attain what they can attain, but of course I think just to make a point that it's important that businesses can do so, either through apprenticeships or post-16 apprenticeships, etc. Make it clear. The other point, just to point out, is there's nothing in here about economic development and business confidence, because that has a lot to play in terms of their recruitment, in terms of how they upskill their employees, the training they put them through, how to increase business confidence, because there's proposals at the moment to perhaps increase the employer contribution on national insurance, which a lot of employers are coming along saying that they might stop hiring because of the extra fees that might be along. So those are issues which need to be addressed. So to say that national issues may have a prolonged effect on business confidence, and whether or not they're going to upskill their existing staff or actually take on newer staff in the future. So I think that's important, and perhaps we should mention that somewhere as well. Yeah. Thank you.
I think, Miles, that's actually very good. I think that's a point we missed out on, actually. And I think it's how we, what we'll do, taking from this, is that we'll look at these 8 core principles, and we'll sort of redo them, and then we'll put little underneath. There'll be a small paragraph that basically says what the ambition of each one of those is, and then we'll pass that back to for your to the chair, and then we can pass that out to the rest of the committee for some comments on. I think that's probably the best way to take these forward. And then what we can then do with that they will then form the basis of our new strategy.
Thank you. So what would the feedback process be on that then, Christine, if we manage things that way?
Taking how we deal with planning committee is the fact that what we will do is that if we'll amend those, and we'll pass them through to obviously to Anne, who will then pass them through to you, and then it's for you then to pass it out to the rest of the committee. If they're then happy with those changes, or any challenges or any comments, we can then take those, and then we can take those forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more observations from you, Councillor Mars? Thank you. Councillor Brown, no? Not from you. Okay, so I think that concludes item 4 then, unless anyone else has anything to add. So on to item 5 now, which is the complaints and compliments policy, and I believe on this one that Councillor Yacoub is going to be introducing it.
So basically, we'll try and get that back to you, we'll say within 2 weeks, and then you can have a look at it before we go back to the next scrutiny. Is that okay?
Thank you. Councillor Yacoub.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. So now we turn our attention to the complaints and compliments policy before you. This is about our commitment to delivering high quality services. This policy is designed to transform resident feedback into a powerful tool for continuous improvement. We don't see complaints as setbacks, but as opportunities to refine and enhance our services, ensuring that we better meet the needs of our community. By actively listening to and learning from our residents, we can shape services that are more responsive and are aligned with their priorities and foster a truly resident-focused council. The proposed complaints and compliments policy before you highlights accessibility and empathy, reflecting best practices from the Information Commissioner's Office, the Housing Ombudsman and the new Housing Regulator. This policy goes beyond just addressing complaints, but it actually also acknowledges and celebrates positive feedback, showcasing the success that we can achieve together. With your scrutiny and your support, we aim to raise the bar in service delivery, uphold regulatory standards, and strengthen our dedication to providing exceptional services for all of our residents. As part of this today, we have a slide where we showcase some data, which should make for some interesting discussions. So I'll hand over to Jana.
Thank you, Councillor Koo. We're just going to present a quick slide. Obviously, this isn't for decision this evening, but really a bit of a teaser around what the opportunity around a centralised approach to complaints has, and also around what we're planning to do ongoing with area committees and the kind of data that will be able to be scrutinised at a local level. We're just about to share that with you. Thank you. Okay. So this gives a bit of a heat map approach to our areas in terms of the deeper the colour, it might be quite difficult to see, is where there's higher issues in terms of complaint issues. We will share this as part of the pack. As I say, this isn't to going and scrutinise complaints in terms of the demand as such, but we did want to share with you the kind of great work that's happened to date from the 19th of December 2022 when we went live with our new centralised systems, and obviously members played a pivotal part in that with us around making sure that we had that centralised route to how we deal with complaints. Just to give some context, on average it takes us around 14 days to resolve. Now that's a very overarching picture because ultimately there's different stages within our complaints. Our stage 2 complaints can take up to 20 days. And since the 19th of December up until yesterday, we'd had just short of nearly 12,000 complaints. There's also a bit of a heat map that we'll be sharing as well in terms of how many complaints get upheld and what the other issues are. But today we just really wanted to show you around what the approach to how we have moved forward with our policy not only helps in terms of a statutory requirement and adhering to the regulatory bodies, but also about the data, the insight, the learning that we can have ongoing. And there's a lot more depth to this data that we'll share with you very shortly. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions from the members? Yeah, Councillor Myers?
Oh, and I'll kick it off, why not? So, obviously a lot of this is statutory with the Ombudsman's and the Local Government Ombudsman, Housing Ombudsman, which we've seen in the past some decisions that have gone against us. And we've obviously complied because we have to, we haven't got much of a choice. In terms of obviously this being brought in sort of 2022 to now and how we streamline things, since it's come in, generally the data before that, has the complaints procedure improved and resolutions been faster going forwards, and have there been less complaints since that time or an increase? Thank you.
Thank you. It's always a difficult one to answer when we go to centralisation. So ultimately the performance prior to that was very segmented and wasn't very consistent. So in reality it looked like we had more complaints compared to what was previously reported. We are going into a reduction of complaints, so we had quite a big critical mass that came in when we had a centralised system because it was all be recorded in one place. Now we're starting to learn, we're starting to see the month-on-month trend reduce. But it was more around really understanding our insight and making sure that's in one place because it was reported on in very different areas. So it's given us a better overview, which in my view enhances the learning and the service we're delivering to our residents.
Yeah, Councillor Myers?
Thank you. So obviously with the centralisation, just to understand how it works, obviously a complaint comes in, it goes to your team. Then they give it out to whichever department, and then they have to reply. So it's pretty much like cancer inquiries. Then they come back to us. Okay. So obviously you've got the stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Then lo and behold, ombudsman if they want to get involved, and it's not been settled. the average times, and obviously 14 days is an average time, but some complaints can be dealt quicker, some people can, but there's obviously there is a deadline to when a reply has to be done to the particular complaint. Are we on track on meeting that all the time, the percentage of how long we either issue the decision on stage 1, stage 2 on a timely basis? I know some could be literally next day, or some could take up to the 14 days, but what's the percentage of how much we go over those 14 days and with a reason? Thank you.
Okay, so as part of the new policy, it's a two-stage approach in terms of how we approach these. You're right, it does come into the Customer Resolution Centre and then it's directed out. We're actually trialling at the moment AI tagging, which means in the future it won't go to the CRC, it'll actually go straight to the service because it will know where to go, it won't need that human intervention, so just wanted to share that. In terms of compliance, when we started this process, the performance was poor. It wasn't where we wanted to be. As of last quarter, we were just below 90% resolution within timeline, and we're really proud of that. That's taken a lot of work on process. There will naturally be some complaints that will always exceed target, things where there's legal implications or external advice required. You generally find in the realms of legal or planning, those kind of inquiries do tend to blur us statistics. What I would say, though, in the future, we're going to be a lot more transparent because we now have the tools to do that. So we'll be able to show you exactly where those inquiries are going over those service level agreements.
Just to clarify on that, so in terms of, sorry, what to do? So just to clarify on that, so obviously I do understand that there are some complaints that obviously may go longer than the 14 or 28 days that we give, but obviously are those complaints within that 14 days given a response to say it can take longer? Because obviously with the skewed data and things like that, say 90% are resolved within that, but obviously with data to say, another data point to say that every single complaint has had a response by the deadline, to say either it's resolved and you can appeal, or we need to take a bit longer due to legal or whatever.
Thank you. Really good question, because it points to one of the points that's actually been made a lot clearer as part of this policy. There was inconsistencies in terms of the SLAs, in terms of responses, also around, are we letting people know when things are going to take longer, and also the reason why. It's been feedback from the Ombudsman, and as part of this process now, we've made that a lot clearer, that we are actually going to be very clear that if we are going to take longer, to express that reason why, and aim to give a resolution of when that is the case and continue to monitor those cases. It has been inconsistent. The organisation's done a very good job in terms of ensuring that's not the case. But there are times where that has happened. We proactively monitor those now, so we have out-of-target monitoring where we'll chase services proactively. Many reasons why that occurs, but we have made that more explicit as part of this. It's our commitment, our promise that we want to do that for residents.
You mentioned AI tagging. Obviously, we've got AI coming up tonight. Just wanted to it goes directly to, but obviously what we're saying here is that you are monitoring the out of target ones to get a response from whatever department. Without a human element here, from a centralised point in, say, who's dealing with complaints and they've got the timelines of when they should be coming in, are we taking away from that service, and are we expecting that with the use of sending it directly to the departments rather than having it from the Customer Resolution Centre, would it, in feedback or thoughts, actually reduce the satisfaction levels in terms of how complaints are dealt with? Because obviously if there's one department that's been a bit slow, obviously you can figure out from the out, but there's no kind of human point of contact to come back, unless you're going to use that in line with a CRC. But then of course, what's the point of having the AI if you're going to use a CRC? Thank you.
Really good question. So at the moment we're doing AI tagging in terms of data insight. So we're trying to learn what that complaint's coming in for, why, learn as much data depth as we can to be able to follow through the trends. In the future, AI will absolutely have benefits, and it will be as well as. And really our point of that is around taking away, improving productivity, taking away things that can be done automated, to allow our staff to do the things that really need that human touch. around chasing, around where there's a really complex case, picking up that phone, having that conversation. So for us, it's very important that we do keep the human element to AI, but there's so many benefits around, certainly around complaints, because it can be transactional, things about the quality of the letters we're sending out. Have we really addressed all those issues? We actually see that as a very good, strong pilot for us moving forward in the near future.
Councillor Brown.
My question builds on your approach, builds on, almost precedes the approach you've taken by going with AI, and it precedes it in this way. The question is, how rich is the data? How granular is it? So that we can learn the lessons we need to learn. For instance, can it answer a question like, which departments is the majority of the complaints related to? Looking at that Power BI dashboard, it didn't seem to have the ability to drill down into any of the reasons for. And currently I'm imagining that that's because there's a human who has to know the complaint and then tag them, or the person who's received, I don't know what the processes are, or the person who receives it selects from a menu of tags. My question is, what is that sort of minimum data set? What are the collection processes like? And all of that. And they're not just nice to haves, but they facilitate the next step, which is asking and being able to ask and answer those questions of the data, from the data, and which will enable learning and development so you can focus on them. My question is, what do you do currently? How's AI going to solve it, I suppose? You know what I'm getting at there, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Absolutely. The data is pretty granular at the moment, and what we've done is we've used AI tagging because we couldn't quite get into the weeds of where that complaint was really happening. Because what we do is when the complaint comes in, we appoint that complaint or assign that complaint based on function, so it goes to the right area, to the right person to answer that. But what that's going to tell you is, for instance, if we use housing repairs, for instance, it's going to go to repairs. But actually what we want to know is there lots of repairs around leaky taps, and actually can we do something proactive, or is there a campaign that we can do? Is there more that we can do around managing expectation? So the AI tagging now has taken us to that next level below. So basically what it's doing is reading every complaint and picking out how many times it says tap, or how many times it says mould or leak, and then starting to bring that information together, or if it's around customer service as opposed to actually anything else. So the AI tagging is coming in really helpful, because what we didn't want to do is keep rebuilding the system. Actually want that insight to go, actually, how granular do we need to build, or is the key really to get the complaint to the right point at the first time to make sure an expert answers it, which is, I think we've actually streamlined that now. But now we're diving into that next level. And actually at the area committees, you'll be pleased to see we're going to go into that granular level. So we're going to be able to show service, and we'll be able to show some themes. And there's always opportunities to improvement to go a bit lower than that.
Any more questions from the members? No? Okay, just a few from me. I'd like to start by talking about compliments, if I may. Because I think there's an interesting emphasis in the document about compliments, and it talks at one point, let me just get the right bit, about when we're talking about complaints, it says learning from complaints, and then under compliments it talks about celebrating success. And obviously, you know, the kudos for the person who solved the issue is always a big thing, but I would like us to not underplay the importance of compliments in identifying things that are going right. I'm just thinking from my experience in the car industry, we used to talk a lot about things gone right as well as things gone wrong, and sometimes they were contradictory. So you could spend your time talking about things gone right. For example, a customer might say, if you ask them what was wrong with their car, oh, there's not quite enough room in the back and the boot's a bit small. So you change the proportions of the car to improve those elements. And actually the reason they bought the car was the design, and you spoil the design by changing the thing gone wrong. So I would like us in the document to focus ideally more on the fact that we can use compliments to understand what's going right and enhance that, as well as the important but not critical point of complimenting individuals who've done a good job.
Thank you. We'll certainly take that feedback on board, and you're right, we do celebrate it, and we make sure every member of staff that gets a compliment, we share that, and we share that very, very proudly, because it does mean a lot to the team. We will emphasise a lot more around this. We'll also start to put that as measures in terms of success. So actually, are we getting that feedback around individuals and the service they're receiving? Because sometimes the news we deliver may be out of our hands. If it's a policy decision, we need to understand that although it might not be the decision somebody wants, but it was delivered in a really sound, kind way that and empathetic, and someone's very grateful for that. We will add, I'll take that back as feedback, we'll add a lot more on that.
Thank you. Second point, I wasn't quite clear on this reading the document. What happens in the complaint procedure in terms of what you might call an act now complaint? I'll give you an example. This is one I actually had from one of my residents, which is, my roof was refitted by Morgan Sindall yesterday. It rained overnight and now water is gushing into my bedroom. So what's the process for that? Is it a service request? Is it a complaint? Is 3 days too long?
That situation is a service request. It's an emergency service request, so straight away onto the emergency line, and that would be dealt with as an emergency request. We wouldn't reopen that complaint. Obviously, we'd revisit and understand what went wrong and the quality, but at that point, it's a service request and an emergency one.
Thank you. Last one. Who decides in this process whether a complaint is closed or not? And I ask this question partly because one of my bugbears with the council inquiries process is that the council decides when my query is being closed. And that always seems to me to be completely out of kilter with every other call centre I ever call, where at the end of the call they say, "Is there anything else I can help you with, Mr. Baker?" In other words, have I actually answered your question to your satisfaction?
It's a very difficult one. This is one we've had lots of debate and lots of scrutiny and support from the Ombudsman on. In theory, it's that point where we truly believe we've submitted a response in full, at whatever stage that may be, stage 1, stage 2. We are working on a number of improvements, so things like council inquiries. We have that ability now where you can hit reply now, and then that can go back into the inbox and we can look at that. In the same way, complaints, we're going to be testing the portal around how that works. Now, ultimately, we don't just want to open that up, because what happens is people might not be satisfied, but that might not mean the complaints are open. Unfortunately, that could be the final answer, and we will stand by that. Obviously, if it's a stage 1 and someone feels like that, as long as they let us know within the 28 calendar days, that ultimately can be reopened and re-escalated. But it has to be asked for by the resident and the reason why, certainly if it's a stage 1 going to a stage 2. If it's a stage 2, obviously at that point they have the right to go to the Ombudsman if they still disagree with our decision. We do, because we have that interaction. If someone comes back to us and they say fundamentally, I feel like you haven't addressed my issues, we will look and reopen that, but it is case by case, because in the main, most people, if they get an answer that isn't in what they expected the outcome to be, they'll probably say, well, I don't want it to be closed. So it is when it should be full and final. Doesn't mean to say sometimes that's a little bit ahead of time, but where it's something we can reopen, we are making enhancements to be able to look at that.
Thank you. Okay, that's all from me. So I'm guessing no further questions from the floor either. Thanks very much. Okay, so item number 6 then, data quality policy. Councillor Koo.
Thank you, Chair. Data is one of our most valuable assets, and obviously from the conversation that we've just had tonight, we can see how important it is. And we are bringing forward our data quality policy, demonstrating our commitment to high standards in how we manage this critical resource. Quality data is essential for making informed decisions that lead to better outcomes for our residents. This policy will ensure that our data is accurate, complete, and consistent, so that every decision is grounded in reliable information. By establishing a strong foundation for data quality, we improve our ability to deliver targeted and meaningful services for our communities. The data quality policy provides a clear framework for enhancing our data handling practices, ensuring that there is accuracy and consistency across all departments. Your insights during the scrutiny process will be really invaluable to us as we continue with this journey of putting forward this data quality policy. And one of the things that I find quite exciting about this is having a policy like this means that when we have partnerships as a council, we also ask those partners to kind of subscribe to this level of data quality. And I think that's really important when we talk about things like housing and we talk about complaints around Morgan Sindel. That's where this comes in and really helps us to get good quality data.
Thank you, Councillor Yacoub. Any questions from the members on the data quality policy? No? Councillor Brown.
Implicit in what you've just said in your introduction, that it's going to have knock-on effects for how we get data from the services we externally procure. How do you police that? Do you have it written into the contract that they are required to provide data in a specific format, and what are the penalties for not abiding by the data quality? Because sometimes I suppose data quality becomes a nice to have rather than people don't actually enforce it.
We can't police the past. If a partner or a contractor will adopt it, that's great, and we are asking those questions once this is formally adopted. But what we are doing, so for instance, we're just in the process of procuring a new housing management system. It isn't an either-or conversation. Once we've adopted this policy, it will be part of the procurement, and we will literally hand that to the provider and say we expect to see all resident data in this format and all asset data in this format in order to comply. If they've got other fields that are great to have beyond that, but the core set of data is going to create a comparable of data sets moving forward. So anything new, and we're actually in an exciting time that we are going to be procuring some really new big systems, so housing management being the first. Obviously we're doing work around in-cab technology, which they're going to be asked to do the same, and we've got the asset management system that's currently in the scoping phase ready to be procured. So this comes so timely around us actually making sure that we set the right foundation around data moving forward. So some really big systems coming forward, and then the future pipeline will pick this up.
And on the second point, what will the penalties be for a person supplying us data who doesn't live up to our expectations?
If it's something that the market standard can't provide, then that's something the council will have to make a compromise on or look at. But actually the reality is if it's something that could or should be provided, ultimately they may not win the procurement on the basis of that would be one of the items that they can't fulfil. So it will be worded into the procurement exercise to say this is how we expect our data in order for us to move forward. There might be some variances in that because it's a standard or a regulatory service, but in the main we need the majority. So we would look for the supplier that could weighing up other procurement factors. I'm not saying it's the only factor, but it would certainly be part of the quality factor.
Okay, and no further questions from the members. Okay, so from no observations from me other than say loving the passion for the data, and I wholeheartedly support the policy. Thank you. Okay, so on now to item 7. So I think I'm right in saying this is the one where we'll have a presentation from the officer. So I'll pass that one over to you guys. Thank you. So this is Resident Digital and Transformation Strategy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm especially excited to introduce our Resident and Digital Transformation Strategy tonight. This plan goes beyond merely just upgrading systems. It is about putting residents at the heart of everything that we do and creating a seamless, accessible and user-friendly experience. Our goal is to become a digital-first council that not only improves efficiency, but also enhances the overall resident experience. The strategy outlines an ambitious path to digitalise our services, making them more responsive and adaptable, and is projected to unlock £1.2 million in savings. A key aspect of this transformation is our commitment to becoming the first council in the country to fully operate on Microsoft platforms and to develop a next-generation data infrastructure that showcases resident data on accessible dashboards, transforming the council into a data-driven organisation. As we shape the way we serve our communities, it is crucial that we stay ahead of the curve. This strategy lays the groundwork for a more connected, a more innovative and a forward-thinking council. By bringing this strategy to scrutiny before it's even passed at Cabinet, we're giving you a unique opportunity to put forward your insights and to help us refine and improve our approach, making it even more effective for our residents. So I welcome any feedback tonight. Genuinely would love to have some feedback so that we can really refine this process and do our best when we bring it forward in Cabinet in November.
Thank you, Councillor Yacoub, for that introduction. You can't help but be infectious with the support. We are very, very excited, and this strategy isn't the first outing. We've been very proactive in terms of the engagement, and I would like to share this is very much in draft form. The core of the values and what we're trying to achieve won't change a great deal from the report, but the presentation will continue to evolve. Also the language, it's really important that this strategy lands within our organisation, but also what this means for the resident as well moving forward. So there'll be some changes around that. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Yacoub's introduced this so well, but we are very, very lucky to have a Cabinet member for digital futures and data analytics. Just shows the passion and commitment in terms of the Council's journey of making sure that this digital transformation journey is the heart of all that we're doing, not only internal of our organisation, but also the support and endorsement from our administration. So what will the strategy deliver? The strategy will deliver improved resident experience. So it's about streamlining processes and, more importantly, prioritising the needs of our local community. We recognise we're in a position around we won't necessarily be able to deliver everything in the same way that we always have or to the same level of performance. So it may be about needing to reprioritise resources where there's the biggest need, and having this enablement will certainly support us doing that, being more informed to make those decisions. We are looking for operational efficiency, so our ambitious programme reshapes its operations and universal services to not only deliver against the needs of our residents, but also think about how we can deliver things in the most efficient, productive way. This strategy fosters an environment that encourages creative problem solving and continuous improvement. We are here to create a culture of innovation and really embed this into our organisation. I apologise, it's probably looking very, very small, but I'll read out the headlines. So this hasn't changed from what's in your packet, just looks very, very different in terms of look. But the aims of the strategy, in an overview, is to build digital capability and modernise services, making our infrastructure modern, secure, but also interoperable. What's happened in the past is we've delivered things or we've created services very siloed because we have administration systems, because that's what the market offered in reality. So as we've been through this journey of innovation and transformation in the past, that may have been the right thing, but what we've ended up is lots of service delivery and services. What the strategy outlines tonight is we want to look across our services, think more thematic, think about how residents access our transactions as opposed to just individual services as well. As you've heard tonight, we want to get better with data and insight, and we've made some big commitments around our data policy, but we want to build on that, and I'll go into a lot more detail around how we're going to do that. We're going to do more around AI capability and ensure that that's embedded within our organisation. We want to deliver resident services online by default. And we're not saying that we don't want humanised services. What we're saying is residents do expect to be able to access and transact with our services 24/7, to be able to self-serve where they're able to, and where they're not able to, know that there's a channel and someone ready to help, but free up those resources to be able to do that, because the reality is there will be some savings that need to be made, but we are committed around making sure that we still keep open those channels for those that best need them. Modern workplace for all of our staff, and that's around how do we equip our staff with the right tools, the right training, the right outlook in terms of innovation. It is about financial sustainability, and it's about not only delivering the 1.2 million savings that's already been aligned to the Council's medium-term financial strategy, but it's also about unlocking future savings, thinking about how we can deliver efficiencies and productivity savings into the future. It's also making sure that we invest in our future, because technology comes with a cost, but that cost needs to be able to deliver benefits, and this strategy looks at how we're going to do that. And it's about supporting innovation across the borough. It's about using smart technology to be able to enhance residents' lives. You know, today we had a managers network and we spoke about how can we use AI and how can we use smart technology. We spoke about things around Alexas are being used in sheltered accommodation in some boroughs around where there's slips and falls and someone wouldn't necessarily need to pull a cord. They can actually ask Alexa to call for help. How can we think about technology to really improve lives and help not only our most vulnerable, but also how can we help productivity of services around bin sensors when bins are overflowing, or there's areas that we're monitoring certain high demand volume areas. So thinking about innovation across our borough, taking that another level about how do we align with economic development, about skills, and making sure that we really nurture our tech skills within the borough. Again, this is another, not an eyesight test. I maybe oversimplify this because it's a journey to get here. But what this is in a nutshell is, this is how we would deliver resident services online by default. And actually the words that are on here, so things like I want to report it, book it, pay for it, apply for it, they're the terms our residents use. And we've been doing lots around monitoring those words. So when someone accesses our services, what term are they using? Where are they looking for that information? So there's lots of analysis of how we've got to this blueprint. But in a nutshell, what this could be, if we follow the journey and we sign up to this, which we are very committed to, is this ultimately becomes our future website blueprint. But in order to do that, services need to think in this way, be designed in this way. Just as an example, at the moment, pay it, there's actually 7 methods to pay for things in our borough, in our council. And I say borough because actually there's certain payments that our partners take on our behalf. So how do we help our residents better navigate that? So thinking about things in a more service blueprint as opposed to and thinking about the transaction opposed to thinking about housing or revenues and benefits, because actually there's a lot of similarities. People apply for services in those areas, they pay for services in those areas. So really working across the organisation to have a more themed approach to how we help our resident. And that's how residents want to transact with us. Most residents don't call us by our traditional service names. They come to apply for an application, whether it's housing benefit. They don't think I need to contact revenues and benefits as an example. So how do we simplify that? But also thinking about the journey around being a dynamic organisation. So how do we use Microsoft tools to be able to deliver this? And as a byproduct, we could ultimately create the My Basildon account. So a portal, and that's something that lots of our residents have fed back, and we'll be piloting this with our members in the very near future. Thinking about the channels in which our residents contact with us, you would think that all of those transactions up there have the similar channels to access. The reality is they don't. So how do we use the insight and service improvement to be able to open up the channels that are best accessed for each individual transaction? Getting better with data. We spoke a lot, as I say, about data and our commitment to it. We have something called the Dataverse. Now that's quite a technical term, but I class that as a pot of data with all of our data that we have. Some of that data is the council's data, some of that's our partner data, some of that's external data such as the NHS and police crime data. And at the moment that's in various different places. And as we become more forward thinking with the data, we will start to analyse that data, and ultimately when we believe that data is credible in terms of it will give us an overview with other data, we will actually load that into what we call our intelligence hub. So that Dataverse starts to give us this huge hub of intelligence, so we can start to think about what's crime data in a certain ward and how does that overlay with antisocial behaviour, and is there housing issues in that particular ward, and we can start to ask questions. Now the data at that intelligence hub level is very complex. So how do we interpret that? And one of the initiatives that Councillor Yacoub supports us very heavily with is BazIntel. And BazIntel ultimately is how we present that data. How do we make that data accessible? How do we really define that data into how we use it to make really informed decisions? So that we'll see in this world lots around dashboards and being able to ask multiple questions and overlay around data, mainly in a demographic area, but we can also overlay different service data, different partner data as that becomes available. Using insights, we've given that its own box because ultimately insight isn't just about data. Insight comes from our members, it comes from our surveys, it comes from our engagement processes. How do we overlay that? So has something that's come back as a form of consultation actually aligned to what the data's telling us? If it isn't, actually, do we make some informed decisions to say, actually, we need to ask different questions, or actually we need to understand what that data's best telling us, because sometimes data sets can tell us what we're asking it rather than how people are feeling about it. So using that really humanised insight, and that comes from various different levels. The one thing I'm very, very proud of, and we've been endorsed by a lot of the partners that we're working with, we're already in the world where we're using AI and forecast predictive capability. And what I mean by that is we're looking at previous data in the past to try and tell us the future. So rather than look at the data here and now, which has been a tradition for the council, we'll look at performance as it's passed, we'll review the previous quarter or the previous year. What we're starting to do now is think about our top issues. So one of the pilot cases we've got at the moment is around temporary accommodation, which members would have heard lots about and been involved with. But actually we're looking forward now to say, actually, we know this is an issue in terms of spend, we know it's an issue in terms of demand, and actually can we look into the future to understand, are there some things that we can do proactively to mitigate that impact, or think differently about how we have provision in order to reduce the spend and cost around that. And at the moment we're in about a 9-month forecast position, and we're actually assessing things month on month to see if our forecasts are accurate. The more accuracy we build, the more the algorithm becomes secure, the more we'll predict into the future. We're also doing some work on things around crime in brownfield sites. There's lots of research happening around that, and we're actually working with universities and researchers around that. So we will be bringing back these case studies as they develop. We can't get away from the fact it is around data governance, security and quality. If the data isn't of a quality, we won't be able to use it in the way that we would hope. There'll be some issues or some gaps. So we are really thinking about this at an early adoption level to make sure that that data is of the best quality it can be. We're doing lots around user training and support hub. We're very aware that this is new for us in the sense of not all services have had to look at their data in this way in the future. So how do we create data champions? And we have a data and insight network that has champions from every area in the organisation. We want this to embed. We don't want this to be long-term as part of transformation. We want this to be how we do business, how we make decisions in the future. It's very much around community and stakeholder engagement, so this will inform that hugely. And it is around the business as usual as well. So we will be looking at our Dataverse around how do we performance monitor and how do we report. We spoke about BazIntel, but I did want to go into more detail about what that means. BazIntel will look and feel, and it will touch all of us in many ways. It will touch all of our members very quickly in terms of area committees. We'll be providing data sets around there. But it's about empowering data-driven decision-making across the council. It's about centralising information, streamlining processes and enhancing our capability to serve residents more efficiently and effectively. So it's about enabling data-driven decisions. It is about improving operational efficiency. It's about transforming service delivery, enhancing our resident engagement and driving sustainable change. So if we have to make a difficult decision around reprioritising resources, for instance, we would look to use data to be able to make those decisions, opposed to potentially something that may be an opinion. Now we'd want to enhance that. I must say it's a journey. Not all areas have the data that some areas have. So again, this process also looks at how do we get the data that we need in the future. So there's a big operational roadmap and transformation roadmap about doing that. I'm not going to go on to AI, I've skipped that slide, and the reason for that is we're going to go into the AI strategy with lots more detail. The strategy talks about innovation across Basildon Council, and we've shared some case studies, and that's really important to myself and Councillor Yacoub about actually sharing case studies, learning what others are doing, but also stimulating creativity within our borough, and in a very short time we'll be creating lots of our own case studies that we'll be showcasing around the improvements we've made. I've touched on a few around smart city initiatives, around how councils are using technology to improve things like traffic management or public safety. They're using it around waste, and there's lots of opportunities around that. But the reality is, building digital capability and modernised services, it's about modernising our services, not just for the now, for the future as well. It's about ensuring we have cutting-edge digital tools, but also that we really know how to use them. That's very important. It's not great to have them for the sake of it. What are going to be the outcomes? What are going to be the benefits? Our strategy, and I'm very, very proud of this, and I share this wherever I can, where anyone will listen, but I also share it in the context of being very, very proud to work for Basildon, and the fact that we work with partners that are the absolute elite in the industry. We're doing lots of work at the moment with Gartner around our customer, looking at benchmarking data, looking at areas that we can enhance our residents' experience, and really start thinking about what that roadmap looks for us around enhancing enhancing the resident experience, but also being able to have a very clear roadmap of where that experience is most benefited in a short term through the strategy. We've been doing lots of work around peer reviews with the LGA. As Councillor Yacoub announced only a week ago, we've been very lucky, after lots of lobbying and requests, where we've been given access to Athena data, which is the NHS data, something that a district council isn't generally privy to. It's unitary level data. We're very proud, and that just shows that we've been able to improve our ability and integrity with data, something they believe we're going to add a great deal of value to. So again, we're very proud that we're starting to get data. It's something that we haven't always had from certain what we would perceive as partners, but data that really tells the ground level story about impacts that happen to our residents. We've said a lot that we're a dynamics organisation. That's very much around digital and data, and we have a dynamic platform in terms of the products that we use. We have a great suite of products, and we're really utilising those to the full effect, and the strategy will help us roll out those across the organisation to deliver outcomes to services and ultimately outcomes to our residents. We are a Microsoft partner, and I'm very proud that we're working in partnership with HSO around our digital strategy, who will be working with us certainly around challenging our strategy, looking how we can best utilise our strategy, but also helping us cost and identify benefits, and making sure that we're driving out as much productivity whilst preserving as much of the services and the experience for our resident as well. I've shared as part of the strategy some of the products that we're using, and I think that's really important. And one of the things I asked the Managers Network today is, and I asked this of members because I'm sure we've all got experience with certain applications we've used in the past, and I'll pick project as an example. We talk about using project and we say, oh, that's great, project managers have got access to project, but actually I've started to say to staff, think about the art of the possible, what it can do in the future now. Microsoft Project doesn't just do what Microsoft Project did in the past. It can absolutely transform how we manage our services, how we manage projects, how we manage interdependencies. So just thinking about how we're going to better leverage technology within our services and think very differently. The one on here that's that we have actually already integrated is we have integrated Copilot, which is the AI platform, into our dynamic solution. So what that means is even where somebody isn't using it, AI is learning from it. So we're starting to do lots of work around what's that telling us, and actually really great insight. We're learning about behaviours, we're learning about interactions, we're learning about feedback, we're learning about areas where there might be a shortfall in the process. And as part of part of this strategy, we will look at where those areas are telling us that we need to look at first. And already we've got data around which one of those themes I showed you we would go for first, because actually transactionally AI is starting to tell us that's where you're getting the most hits in terms of customer demand or resident demand. As part of the strategy, this isn't my strategy or Councillor Yakub's strategy. This is our strategy. Every leader is a digital leader, and that's something that we will continue to share. It will be a mantra of this of this strategy moving forward. We all have the duty around believing in the digital transformation, thinking about how we equip the right skills and embrace digital tools across all our roles, whether that's as elected members, whether that's as leaders within the organisation. And we're going to do lots around skill development programmes, providing training and resources, empowering our leaders, making sure that we have champions leading the digital initiatives, supporting their teams, and cross-team collaboration. No longer do we want to think in silo, we want to think across the council. So every team will be involved in our transformation, and as we bring forward more around the roadmap and the organisational transformation programme, you'll be able to see how we've been able to harness that across all of the services. We spoke about technology and digital and transformation, but what does that mean in terms of tangible outcomes? We will have a modernised infrastructure. The council still has a number of legacy systems. That impacts us in terms of data, it impacts us in terms of experience, it impacts us in terms of being able to manage our infrastructure. So about how do we get those outdated hardware, how do we get the outdated software, how do we bring more flexibility? We want to enhance our security. Our number one risk as a council is cybersecurity. So this transformation journey needs to be, as I say, thinking about the now and into the future, because cybersecurity will get more complex, it will get more inevitable as time goes on. We spoke about interoperability, but ensuring our systems truly work together. You know, I say to our staff, you might have to access multiple systems. Can you imagine what that feels like for a resident? Not only are they accessing multiple services, transactions, they probably feel like they're accessing multiple systems as well. So thinking about how things are interoperable, more streamlined. It's about sustainability and resilience. One thing I'm very passionate about as part of this strategy is we don't deliver for the here and today or the new thing that everybody's delivering. It's about thinking about our roadmap, you know, over the next few years, thinking about what technology is coming forward, really pushing the ambition and modernising and thinking about where we're going for a more evolving need of our community as well. So using that data to think about accessibility in terms of today, but actually where is our communities going over the next few years. I spoke about this. It is about financial sustainability as well. We're not hiding from the fact that this strategy delivers significant savings. It will unlock further savings into the future, such as the 2025 AI strategy savings, where we will be very proactive about what savings AI can unlock. This is about, as I've said before, investing in our future. We don't want to get to the point where we have quite a tired, uninvested infrastructure. We need to make sure that we continue and invest in that. Think about future innovations. Think about how innovation can unlock, so things like spend to save initiatives. Think about income and savings maximisation. This strategy starts to think about seeking new opportunities, not only for ongoing efficiencies, but new revenue opportunities and access to external funding and investments. And we've already made some announcements about the fact that our ambitions are those that our partners want to work with, and we have already unlocked investments around some pilots. So for us, in a nutshell, we spoke very much around digital and transformation. But all of that said, as a collective, this is about keeping our resident at the heart of all that we do. When we build these services, it's thinking about the resident impact. It's thinking about how our residents best access our services, but also thinking about where residents can't access those services. Are there other provisions, and why and where would that occur? So lots we do around community engagement, but really making sure that this strategy unlocks a clear plan, a clear programme of what projects are going to be delivered now and into the very close future in terms of unlocking those savings, but also making sure that that innovation is possible within those services.
Lovely, thank you very much for that, Shannon. So, members, any questions on that content? Councillor Moore.
I think that's all very exciting, but the thing that I'm missing is what happens to the resident that doesn't have access to the internet or doesn't want to have access to the internet. I've got quite a large number of elderly residents, sort of my age, that just don't want to interact with these kind of systems. So what are we doing about that? Didn't want that to be a sort of downer, but
no, not at all. I think
realistic.
Absolutely, accessibility is really important. Inclusion is very, very important to us, and that's why we did put at the centre of this the residents at the heart of what we do. We know, and we will continue, and we are very proud. One of my service areas, community engagement. We still do lots around outreach. We will still have provision of those that can't access our services through digital means. We might reduce provision on some of those services, but it's about making sure that people can still contact us that need to. It's about making sure that, you know, vulnerable residents are able to access our services. But just to share that around accessibility, I appreciate that this may not be for everybody and that we may still need to provide those services. But one of the things that we've already delivered as part of this strategy, and it came as us working on a case study with learning from another organisation, was our translation services. The council spent last year just under £100,000 on translation services, and it isn't a very personable service. I've always felt quite uncomfortable about it because you have to work out what language it is to be able to ask an interpreter to interpret, and that always feels very unempathetic, and it could be quite a vulnerable customer. And actually what we've done is we've actually stopped that service, and we've started to use translation services through AI. And actually we've had some really good feedback in, yes, there might be some sentiment missing, but actually it started a dialogue very, very quickly. Now, I'm not saying we'll never use a translation phone service, but actually it just shows that it can actually open up more around accessibility as well. But we will always be mindful about the resident being at the heart of what we do. So we do know, actually sheltered accommodation, today one of the managers was there and they were talking about how they want us to go and do some digital eagle sessions where we can teach some of the residents in the sheltered accommodation, can we lend devices, those kind of things, because some of the residents have shown that they want to learn but they don't know how to, or they don't have an access to a device. So we'll be thinking about that as part of this strategy as well.
So another thing I'd mention is digital inclusion will always be a part of this transformation strategy. And one of the things that we are doing is we're learning from what other councils have done. And one council, Wigan Council, what they implemented is something called tech tea parties. And this is an opportunity where, you know, you get residents who might not have access to, you know, digital, they might not have access to computers, they might not have those capabilities or skills, but you bring them in a very light-hearted setting and you help them through it. And it's about making sure that as we go through this transformation as an organisation and as a council, we also make sure that we don't leave anyone behind. So these are all things that we will be looking at as we deliver this strategy to ensure that, like Shanna has mentioned, residents will be at the heart of it, and it's all residents, even those who might not have access to electronics or digital stuff.
Anything else from you, Councillor Moore, or if we no? Councillor Myers?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's going in the right direction. Obviously, we know that digital and the way we work has changed over the last couple of decades, and it is important that we realise as a council and as a workforce for our staff to be able to work easier and efficiently going forwards. Just correct me if I'm wrong here. We've got some legacy systems, okay, and obviously when they're due for renewal, because obviously the contracts are still going, I assume then that we're going to be using something that's still, in terms of like data quality, using the same kind of aspect as Microsoft partners or Dynamic system. With some of the legacy things and everything else like that, because I know we've had something like the housing management system, etc. What happens if Dynamics fails?
That's a very good question. We make sure our infrastructure, so there will be, I've not known of it, touch wood, in terms of the Dynamics platform, I've not heard of that going down, but we do know in terms of it's hosted somewhere, and it's hosted in different data centres that we pay for that hosting. Now, the way our infrastructure works is we don't just have it on one hosting, there is a switchover position. So we have resilience, we have those business continuity procedures in place, and we have our business continuity plan, and one of those is things like what would you do if there's a cyber attack, what would you do if your systems, you couldn't get onto your systems, and we have a full plan of what that looks like. The reality is we have to have those plans because it could happen. The likelihood of it's very low, and we have a plan A, a plan B, and all being, all failing that, we've got a plan C in terms of if we had to go into manual mode, what does that look like, or can someone else help us in terms of those data centres? Hopefully not that.
Yeah, because of course there was the big one earlier on last year where the antivirus software went down, and obviously on the Microsoft platforms, and then everything around the world crashed. Couldn't get a flight, couldn't get hospital appointments, couldn't get this, couldn't do anything. So obviously there are, as you mentioned in your report, security is absolutely number one priority, which is correct, because obviously if we're storing all of this data, and a lot of it's very personal, especially revs and bends and things like that, you've got people's accounts and are they on benefits, etc. So we do hold quite a lot of sensitive personal data, and we are all here as data protectors, etc. So obviously it's trying to make sure that obviously with the resilience and if someone external from the council, but not us getting hacked or some cybersecurity attack, but a platform that we use, such as Dynamics, such as the Microsoft systems, then of course that could potentially lead to the data that we hold also being taken through the back door. So I just think that we need to be clear that whilst it's very important that the workforce has an easier life, and that residents who do use these systems can find it easier to access our services. As Councillor Moore mentioned, there are those that won't, and I appreciate that. I hope we don't call it what they call it Wigan Tech Tea Parties. It's a bit of a terrible name, to be honest. But I think it is important that those that do want to learn, we can facilitate that, and we've seen before, excuse me, with other external partners who go and do this. So I believe Essex has done a few digital things in the past with loans and things like that of technology. So I think that's good, but I just think we need to be really clear that going forwards, and we make sure that obviously this is not going to be a quick process. We want to make sure that obviously that the IT security and the data sets that because we've been talking about data quite a lot, quality or no quality, that there will still be something there with someone's name, address, bank or whatever, account number, council tax circumstances, etc. on there. That as we go sort of piecemeal through this, we don't just jump through a hoop and say it's done, but take it piecemeal by service for the data they hold. I think it's important to realise, because you also mentioned that some of the data we hold is from external providers as well. So with the police, with the NHS, county, maybe some other organisations as well, Morgan Sindall. To mention one, I always smile when I say their name, I don't know why. But I think it's important that we review security at each stage of this going forwards. So just no comments on that. I don't really have it. I think it's the correct thing to do going forwards, obviously with the workforce and stuff, but obviously to make sure that those that don't like using IT or don't want to or whatever have the facility to access it, but just to protect everyone's data, and because we don't want to be sitting here and all of a sudden my phone keeps blowing up, Richard's phone blows up, Mike's phone blows up, also Walter's phone blows up because Basildon Council website's down or something like that, and they can't access a portal to pay or do anything. I mean, all of a sudden we're getting inundated with phone calls and emails, and then we can't access our emails and things like that. So it's very important that we can make sure we get this right.
Just to say, data security is paramount for us. It goes without saying. We're talking lots about software, so Dynamics is a software, but just to give you some assurances, our infrastructure has layers. So we don't just have one layer of coming in. I won't go into too much, but there's multiple layers. And actually, when that outage happened, when you was talking about the flights, the GP said some councils were impacted, Basildon wasn't, because ultimately we have different layers about how we access that, how we come into our networks. We can never say never. That's the reality. But we plan. We do lots around infiltration testing. We're doing lots around cyber investment. So our infrastructure security is absolutely paramount, the same way as data is. There may be sometimes outages. Actually, I think midnight Sunday, we woke up, we came into work, the website had gone down. It was a reboot issue. We made sure the team were on it. They knew very quickly before opening of business it was dealt with. It's very BAU in terms of making sure accessibilities to services, and actually being on a platform such as Microsoft, we're, touch wood, less likely to get the issues we get with local legacy systems. They are propped up, if a better term, but it is about thinking about not only about that software, our infrastructure piece, and that infrastructure piece we've made lots of investment around that.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of legislation around personal identifiable information, and I'm sure the council holds a lot of information that is personal identifiable and covered by the relevant legislation. I wondered if the council has a position, because I know that the NHS does this, where someone has the ability to opt out of their information being aggregated or used by the council, because and when someone makes a complaint or has a contact with the council, you make secondary use of that data, either for performance planning or for forecasting use. You make use of it, whatever it is. Does a person have the opportunity? Just, I suppose it's a corollary of what Councillor Moore was saying. Some people might not want to access services through the internet, but in a tangential way, might not want their for whatever, maybe they're conspiratorially minded, or whatever, they might have some legitimate reason, but they might not want the big state to have information or to use information about them.
Thank you. We can't hold or share data beyond the reasoning of what we're doing. So any sharing of data has to have complicit consent, even to the point where if somebody's provided data, for instance, a survey, we can't suddenly decide, oh, that department over there wants this. It's about complicit consent. Even how we manage data, which actually, to the contrary of why that's in place, a lot of residents have frustrations to go, well, I told you over there and you haven't told over there. So we are doing some work around where we can be more seamless with data, which this will help. But your point about opting out, with the Dataverse and the data insight, the level that we're presenting that data is at such a high level. So we're, things like where I showed you the complaints data, we've got hotspots. The data ultimately becomes anonymised. So even when we're using crime data and we're using health data, we're doing it at such a large level overlay that it can't identify one person, and we wouldn't present something that's identifiable, not in a public way. We will be using data internally to maybe identify vulnerabilities or where there's interventions, but ultimately the resident has to complicitly consent to that, or they've accessed a service where they've had a privacy statement to say this is the purposes that we've been using it for. There is a statement in there about if you don't want that to happen, you can contact us. But again, we comply to all those statutory requirements.
Okay. Any further member questions now? Okay, so a few from me. So very impressive sounding strategy, I must say. On the financials, though, are we sure this is going to deliver 1.2 million worth of savings? Shannon, on the basis that costs are certain, but savings are anticipated often.
We're going to be doing lots more work in terms of the depth of the 1.2 million. We'll be going to informal cabinet in December around identifying and evidencing where that 1.2 million is. The reality is it's about at what level and where we will deliver the 1.2 million, because it's within the medium financial term strategy. But there are levels of certainty, and some areas we've been quite prudent, so we're actually going back to revisit whether it can release more. There might be some areas where we actually think they've been quite ambitious, or the time might delay. So again, those that maybe could be more ambitious, could they? So it's a bit of a reprioritising exercise at the moment, but also really identifying, have we been too prudent or have we been over ambitious? We're doing that. But as I've said, I've named a couple. They are relatively big projects and programs that we're delivering, but we will be delivering the 1.2 million, and we'll bring more detail about what that looks like. Thank you, glad to hear it. Okay, I mean, I don't know about the other guys, but a lot of this is not in my comfort zone at all, I've got to say. So, can you give us like a practical, real-world example of creativity and of a cutting-edge digital tool? What does that mean to the, in terms a layperson would understand?
So one of the things that I kind of talked about earlier today when we had the Managers Network is around how using AI and using this type of technology can have really huge implications and could have life-saving potential. So at 10 Downing Street, you get letters, thousands of letters daily. And sometimes those letters are from very vulnerable people who feel like their last cry of help, is something that they're communicating to their government. And unfortunately, it can take up to 5 weeks for someone to physically read that letter and respond. And sometimes what that means is, that person's situation has gotten a lot worse, or the person has sadly passed away. And so putting an AI solution in place could look like where you would scan for terminology that identifies vulnerabilities and just put those letters at the top of the pile. And this now means, this person in this situation gets a response faster and, gets their plea for help heard. When it comes to, let's say, waste, one of the big issues we've had is we've had missed collections, and some of our, complaints when they spiked were all around missed collections. When we set in place in-cab technology, which will be optimized with, AI solutions, and we'll be taking all of that data and looking at it, it will mean that, when someone's already on a route, they don't need to go back to the depot and collect that physical copy of, oh, here's a missed collection, this is what you need to do. They can, optimize the way that they do things, and they can make sure that that missed collection's dealt with. If something is being missed lots of times, it means it's flagged up, and we look at why is that happening. Thinking ahead, we've been talking a lot around devolution, and we've got a huge problem with potholes. We've got a huge problem with potholes where that investment is just not there. Imagine an AI solution where you have sensors that identifies potholes, identifies the severity of them, looks at, the level of traffic in that area, and then prioritizes what we fix and how we do it. These are some of the kind of like more tangible examples where I feel, this type of cutting edge technology really helps. Shanna mentioned temporary accommodation and housing and homelessness. Again, this is where that comes in, where we predict that demand and we anticipate it beforehand, and we have a plan in place on how we tackle that. Something that we deal with a lot is issues of mould in our council properties. There are councils across the country that have implemented technological solutions around having mould censoring devices, where you can have, you can automatically be notified that actually there's a mould problem here. Imagine having a solution like that. So these are all kind of ideas, these are all case studies that we can learn from other people, and these are things that we are thinking about as we go on this journey.
Okay. Okay, great. Living that pothole thing example, by the way. That sounds great. So just one last thing from me. I mean, obviously, really impressive strategy, and obviously your passion for it kind of tells me we're along the right lines without anything else really. But it needs a better name, guys. And in fact, I've seen the name written about 3 or 4 different ways in the documents. It needs a better name.
I think when this strategy is essentially like that overarching strategy, which is why it's called the Resident Digital and Transformation Strategy, because, you know, as we mentioned in one of the slides, every leader is a digital leader, but we're also trying to recognise we live in a digital era. So delivering for residents automatically means delivering with this digital capability. And we recognise that in order to do this, there's a lot of transformation that needs to happen. You know, the name thing is something I think we've gone back and forth on a lot of times. If you have something grand or a good suggestion, we welcome it. But yeah, that's our thinking behind the name.
Okay, thank you. I still think there's a killer name there, just waiting to be discovered. I just don't know what it is. Okay, in the absence of any further comments on that one then, so our next item is AI strategy. So back to you guys. Actually, while you're looking, does anybody want to take a quick 5-minute break? I mean, I'm fine, but if anyone wants to do so. No? Press on? Yep, okay.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So before you have our very first AI strategy for the Council. We stand at the forefront of a transformation era as we embrace artificial intelligence to redefine how we deliver services. This strategy envisions a future where AI is able to enhance our ability to connect with our communities in innovative ways whilst increasing efficiencies, boosting productivity, and generating savings. Imagine a council that not only anticipates the needs of its residents, but also tailors services to meet those needs in real time. Our vision is to harness AI to create a more inclusive and personalised experience for residents. Through the thoughtful integration of AI, we will unlock new possibilities for innovation, we will make informed data-driven decisions, and we will address the challenges that are ahead, and we will enhance service delivery. Our AI strategy seeks to establish us as pioneers in leveraging artificial intelligence, as demonstrated in the case study slides presented, which highlight how AI is rapidly becoming a key focus for agile and forward-thinking councils nationwide. Once again, we're bringing this to you before we take it to Cabinet, so any feedback that you can provide will help us to refine this strategy, and we will make sure that, you know, as we go on this journey, we use AI to optimise all council functions, and we're able to maximise both service delivery and resource efficiency.
Any questions from the members? Not from Councillor Moore. Councillor Myers?
Yeah, it's not a question as such. I mean, obviously, a lot of this tails back into what we've just discussed for the last 45 minutes, hour. But there were lots of good points made and everything else. No, just to sort of point out, obviously, again, what I was saying about with AI and how we use it, because obviously it means a lot of different things. It means either using it for sort of like the text to speech. You mentioned translation services, things like that, to guess what's happening. So a lot like sort of Google does when you put something in the search engine. But of course, using things like sort of ChatGPT and and other platforms that are trying to predict what you're saying, but not quite getting it right. So obviously, there's concern about the platforms that are using to kind of give the answer to the points you're trying to make. Either it's a resident asking a chat bot to say, I need access to this. You go, for example, the other day. I had a bank card cancelled, so I couldn't bother to phone him because it takes forever. So I just went on the thing, but it gave me an option saying because I said lost card or something like that, just to report it that way. But the first thing it offered me, it says, do you want to make a deposit? And it's like, well, we need to get I don't think we're quite there yet with AI to say that it's that sort of AI to say that it's functionally perfect. You know, obviously some of the other things they're doing, sort of the in-cab technology as well, is very important. We've been discussing this for years and how to do it, and how to get the system that the council wants and needs for that. And obviously I assume that's a bespoke kind of offering that would have to go as the way the council's systems work. I do think as well that obviously it does come down to the security aspect that I spoke about earlier, and obviously lots of things to do with that, and how, you know, it does, a lot of it just ties into the last thing, and obviously without this kind of thing, obviously it creates a transformation for staff and how they do their work, efficiencies, etc., which I have no problem with. Generally, it's just obviously just a safety thing and just being careful that we don't rush too quickly and find ourselves in a bit of a hole going forwards, and taking it, you know, smoothly and making sure that we get it right first time.
Councillor Brown, anything from you? No? Okay, just one comment from me. So this might sound a bit negative, but it's not. It's a serious question. So the language in the report is very ambitious, and we talk about being a pioneering leader that sets a benchmark for innovation in local government. So the question is, why is outright pioneering leader the right strategy for Basildon Council? I mean, as opposed to amongst the leaders, fast follower, you know, competitive, not the best, not the worst, or a terrible expression we used to use in Ford, or I've heard people use, last in, best dressed, which basically means sit around, wait for everybody to make a load of mistakes, and then cherry pick all their best bits. So why and sub-question, given that we've got 8 case studies in the document, is it even possible for us to be the pioneering leader at this point in time?
Thank you. That's a really good question, actually, and I like that question because it really makes you think. I would say that when you look at some of the things that we want to develop, it puts us in a very unique position from 2 perspectives. So one is, when we're talking about being a Microsoft organisation, that isn't just about using Microsoft products. What we're saying is, we want Microsoft to have a look at its offer around the public sector, and to actually invest in what we're trying to achieve here, because it is something that can be replicated across the public sector. So it's an opportunity for Microsoft to invest in us, and by doing so create almost a kind of template or a pilot where this can then take place across other public sector services. So that's one reason why we want to be a pioneer and we want to be a leader in this transformation. The second reason is, when we develop solutions that really work, we are at a unique opportunity where we can share this with other councils, and in some cases we're able to kind of have shared services where we again generate income streams, which helps us with all things, you know, local council related. When, you know, one of the main issues we have, as every council up and down the country has, is our budget and having budget gaps. So from those 2 perspectives, I would say those are really, you know, 2 really key reasons why we want to be leaders in this. But generally, we want to be ambitious in Basildon. And, you know, like Shannon mentioned as well, and all across the strategies, we keep talking about innovation. And I think it's because we know that Basildon has so much potential. Like, we've had this kind of visioning event. We talk about the regeneration of Basildon, but there's so much potential in this space, and we want to be able to kind of lead with that as a council as well. So those would be my reasons.
Okay, thank you. But I mean, it sounds expensive as well, though. Is that are we concerned about that? Serious question. I mean, obviously that's one of the things I suppose comes into play in terms of where you position your strategy is the cost-benefit trade-off and so on. Are we happy with that?
Absolutely. We're not going to just do things for the sake of being the best at doing it. You know, as much as that's nice, there has to be a return on benefit. We are, you know, absolutely thinking about measurable benefits, and we are doing this to make efficiencies and savings towards the MTFS. There's no hiding away from that. So if something does cost us a considerable amount, as long as it pays back over that period and some with ongoing benefits, why wouldn't we do it? And everything will be assessed case by case. Great.
Thank you very much. Any further questions on AI? No. Oh,
Sorry,
Good.
I should have done this before, but I just want to thank Shanna and Matt and Ioana for all of the work that they've done around these strategies and all of the other background work that they're currently working on. They've done an amazing job, and I just want to place on record that I want to thank them for their work.
lovely, thank you. Hear, hear. Councillor Morris.
Just a quick point, because obviously didn't receive this yesterday. I know Councillor Baker, you sent me an email, but I'll be following up with some copies of an email which I'll send to the Chair to pass on, if that's okay.
Thank you. Okay, so last item, work programme. Question here, I think, really is there anything that anyone would like to add on to our forthcoming work programme that's not already in the list, that's stipulated within the agenda? Do you mind if you look into that, actually, Councillor Miles, in terms of whether it's appropriate for this committee and whether anyone else is looking at it? We'll get back to you on that, if that's okay. Yeah?
Okay, so just
You've noted that, haven't you?
Town Centre Security Plan.
Town Centre Security Plan on top of Master Plan.
Anything from you, Councillor Brown? No? Okay, I think we're done then. Thank you so much for all your time and your participation, everybody, and safe journey home. Hope it's not